How would you do if the people you trusted most plotted your death? For Michael, a wealthy entrepreneur, his seemingly perfect life crumbled when he discovered his wife and brother conspiring to kill him for his fortune. But instead of succumbing, he turned the tables, staging his own death to expose their betrayal. As secrets unravel and loyalties are tested, this tale of revenge and redemption will keep you on the edge of your seat. But before we dive into the story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy this tale, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another gripping story. Michael stood at the edge of his expansive balcony, the glittering city below stretching out like a constellation of lights. The cool breeze ruffled his tailored suit, a small reminder of the life he had built, a life that many could only dream of. At 45, he was the embodiment of success. A self-made millionaire with a sprawling empire, Michael was the kind of man whose very presence demanded respect. His mansion, perched atop the city's most exclusive hill, was a testament to his hard-earned achievements. Every corner of it exuded luxury. Marble floors, priceless art, and crystal chandeliers that seemed to hum with wealth and power. Beside him, Rachel, his wife of 10 years, sipped a glass of red wine. Her presence was magnetic, her smile warm and polished, the picture of elegance. To the world, they were the perfect couple, partners in every sense. But Michael often found himself marveling at her poise, her unwavering composure. She was too perfect, he thought, yet he pushed the idea aside as paranoia. After all, what more could he want? A loving wife, a thriving business, and his younger brother Terry, his confidant and the one person Michael trusted implicitly. "You've really outdone yourself, Mike," Terry said as he stepped onto the balcony, holding a whiskey glass in one hand and offering a grin that mirrored his older brother's. Terry was the kind of man who could light up a room with his easy charm. Michael had always been protective of him, guiding him through life like a father figure after their parents passed away. Michael clapped a hand on Terry's shoulder, his voice rich with pride. "You know, sometimes I think life can't get any better. I have it all. What else could a man ask for?" Rachel exchanged a fleeting glance with Terry, subtle enough for Michael to miss. The corners of her lips curled in a way that wasn't quite a smile. Her eyes lingered on Michael a second too long, as if savoring the moment, before she turned her gaze to the city below. Then, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't the breeze or the distant hum of the city. It was something deeper, an undercurrent that Michael couldn't quite place. A chill crawled up his spine, but he dismissed it as the wind. "I'll head inside," Rachel said softly, her voice smooth and soothing. She placed a hand on Michael's chest and kissed him on the cheek. "Don't stay out here too long." Michael watched her disappear through the sliding glass doors, her silhouette framed by the warm light of their lavish living room. He turned back to Terry, raising his glass. "To us, to family," he said with genuine affection. "To family?" Terry echoed, though the words lacked the conviction they once carried. As the night deepened, Michael couldn't shake the sense that something was off. He chalked it up to overwork. Another late night spent poring over business deals, another headache from balancing his empire. But when he retired to the master bedroom hours later, Rachel was already asleep, her expression serene and unbothered. The next morning, Michael's routine unfolded as usual. A quick workout in his private gym, a protein shake prepared by his personal chef, and a review of his emails while Rachel greeted him with a bright smile and a steaming cup of coffee. Yet, for the first time, that smile didn't reach her eyes. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Michael had built his fortune on reading people, on detecting the slightest shifts in tone or demeanor. And Rachel's eyes, those beautiful, calculating eyes, betrayed something darker. By the time Terry arrived for breakfast, Michael's unease had grown. His brother seemed distracted, his usual joviality replaced with a nervous energy. Michael frowned but said nothing, opting instead to focus on the stack of documents in front of him. Hours later, Michael stood in his office, gazing at the framed photo on his desk. Himself, Rachel, and Terry, all beaming at the camera during a Christmas dinner years ago. He remembered that night vividly, the laughter, the toasts, the feeling of security that came from having the people he loved most by his side. But now, staring at that photo, a nagging doubt took root in his mind. Something had changed, or perhaps it had always been there, lurking beneath the surface, and he had been too blind to see it. The thought was ridiculous, wasn't it? Rachel adored him, Terry idolized him. They were his family, his sanctuary. Still, as the afternoon sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Michael found himself questioning the very foundation of his life. What if the paradise he had built wasn't paradise at all? What if it was a facade, carefully constructed by those he trusted most? He brushed the thought away, unwilling to let paranoia consume him. After all, Rachel and Terry were family. They would never hurt him. Would they? The parking lot was eerily quiet, the occasional hum of a distant car the only sound breaking the stillness of the night. William, a boy no older than 12, crouched behind a rusted dumpster, clutching a half-empty bottle of water. The sharp wind bit through his threadbare jacket, but he paid it no mind. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, yet the growling noise didn't bother him anymore. He was used to it. What he wasn't used to was the sharp-edged tension in the air. Moments earlier, he'd slipped into the shadows of this upscale lot, hoping to scavenge some scraps from the bins behind the towering mansion-like homes nearby. Instead, he stumbled upon something far more dangerous. He froze, ears pricked, when he heard voices, low, deliberate, and dangerously conspiring. "You're sure this will work?" The woman's voice was smooth but carried a steely edge that made William instinctively shrink back. He peeked through the narrow gap between the dumpster and the wall, his wide eyes landing on a tall, elegant woman. Rachel. "Of course it will," came the reply, a man's voice, casual yet laced with venom. William could see him now, Terry, though he didn't know the name. Terry leaned against a sleek black car, hands stuffed in his pockets, the faint light from the lamppost casting jagged shadows across his face. Rachel took a step closer to Terry, her stilettos clicking against the pavement. "The brakes need to fail at just the right moment," she said coldly. "No loose ends, no suspicions." William's breath caught in his throat. Brakes? He leaned in closer, ignoring the way the jagged metal of the dumpster scraped against his arm. "Relax," Terry said, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I've handled it. By the time the car hits that curve tomorrow, Michael will be, how should I put it, out of the picture." Rachel's laugh was soft, almost melodic, but it sent a chill racing down William's spine. "Good. I want this done cleanly. Once he's gone, everything will fall into place." William's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the dumpster, his mind racing. He didn't know who Michael was, but he understood one thing. These people were planning something terrible, something that could end a life. His first instinct was to run, to put as much distance between himself and these two as possible. But as he edged backward, Rachel's voice rang out again, stopping him cold. "This is our only shot, Terry. Don't mess it up. We've worked too hard for this." William clenched his fists. He had seen enough cruelty in his short life, enough people turning their backs on others, to know how easy it was to do nothing. But something about this moment felt different. He couldn't just walk away. He had to warn this Michael, whoever he was. With his heart pounding, William slipped away from the dumpster, every step calculated to avoid detection. His breath came in shallow bursts as he darted into the shadows, his mind buzzing with questions. Who was Michael? Where could he find him? And would he even believe a ragged street kid with nothing but a warning of imminent danger? As dawn broke, William found himself standing outside the gates of the grand estate he'd seen Rachel and Terry leave earlier. The mansion was intimidating, a fortress of wealth and power that seemed worlds apart from the grime and desperation of the streets he called home. Yet, he forced himself to move forward, his resolve solidified with every step. Sneaking past the guards wasn't easy, but William had been slipping through cracks and crevices for as long as he could remember. He finally made it to a back window and tapped, lightly, praying someone inside would hear. Luck was on his side. A man, tall and impeccably dressed, appeared. His piercing gaze locked onto William, who immediately felt a pang of doubt. Was this Michael? Would this man believe him, or would he call the police and have him thrown out? Michael opened the window, his brows furrowed. "What are you doing here, kid? This is private property." I need to talk to you," William stammered, his voice shaking. "It's important. It's about your car. Your brakes." Michael's expression shifted, skepticism mingling with faint curiosity. "My car? What are you talking about?" "I heard them," William blurted out, desperate to get the words out before fear consumed him. "The woman, Rachel, and the guy, Terry. They're planning to mess with your brakes. They said you'd—" He hesitated, then forced himself to say it. "They said you'd be gone." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Michael's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "Rachel and Terry, are you sure about this?" "Yes," William insisted, his voice rising with urgency. "I swear I'm telling the truth. Please, you have to check your car." Michael stared at the boy, his mind reeling. The notion seemed absurd. Rachel and Terry plotting to kill him? But the boy's desperation was palpable, his words too specific to be dismissed as a random lie. A seed of doubt took root, growing rapidly as Michael recalled the subtle shifts in Rachel's behavior, the strange tension in Terry's demeanor. "Wait here," Michael said, his voice calm but firm. He disappeared into the house, returning moments later with his car keys and a phone in hand. William trailed behind him, watching as Michael inspected the sleek black vehicle parked in the driveway. He checked every inch of the car, his movements growing more frantic as the truth revealed itself. The brake line had been tampered with. Michael's chest tightened as rage and betrayal crashed over him like a tidal wave. Rachel and Terry, two people he had trusted with his life, were planning to take everything from him. He turned to William, his voice steady but cold. "You did the right thing coming here." "What are you going to do?" William asked, his small frame trembling with the weight of what he'd uncovered. Michael's gaze hardened, his jaw set in determination. "I'm going to make them regret ever thinking they could cross me." The sun rose sluggishly over the city, its warm hues failing to pierce the growing storm brewing in Michael's mind. He stood at the window of his study, staring at his car parked below, his hands clenched tightly into fists. The betrayal was sharp, cutting deeper than he thought possible. Rachel, the woman he had loved and trusted, and Terry, the brother he had sworn to protect, had conspired to take his life and fortune. The evidence was irrefutable, the brake line deliberately tampered with. And now, it was time for them to pay. Michael turned to William, who sat cautiously on the edge of the leather sofa, his young face a mix of fear and determination. "You were brave to come to me," Michael said, his voice steady but cold. "And now, I need your help again." William's eyes widened. "What do you want me to do?" Michael crouched to the boy's level, his gaze intense. "We're going to make them believe they've won. If they think I'm dead, they'll let their guard down. That's when we'll strike." The boy hesitated, but seeing the raw conviction in Michael's eyes, he nodded. "What's the plan?" Setting the stage. Later that day, Michael and William drove out to an abandoned stretch of road on the city's outskirts. It was perfect, desolate, with no cameras or prying eyes, just a winding lane framed by dense woods. Michael explained his plan in detail, his tone sharp and methodical. They would stage a car crash, complete with a burned-out vehicle. He had already arranged for a decoy car that matched his own, towed to the site under the cover of darkness. William helped as best he could, his small hands working alongside Michael's practiced efficiency. Together, they rigged the decoy vehicle to explode upon impact, a canister of gasoline strategically placed under the chassis. As dusk fell, Michael stood back and surveyed their grim handiwork. "This has to be convincing," he muttered. "No room for error." William glanced at him nervously. "What happens if they find out it's fake?" Michael's expression hardened. "They won't." The next morning, Rachel and Terry sat in the opulent dining room, their faces masks of calm, but beneath the surface they simmered with anticipation. Michael was supposed to leave for a business meeting early, driving the car they had sabotaged. Rachel sipped her coffee with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's all falling into place," Terry said quietly, his voice tinged with excitement. Rachel's lips curved into a sly smirk. "Finally, no more waiting." But when the phone rang, the sound shattered their composure. Rachel answered, her voice sweet as honey. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Mrs. Emerson, this is Officer Daniels from the Metro Police. I'm afraid I have some bad news." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. "Bad news?" "There's been an accident. Your husband's car was found on Ridgewood Drive. The vehicle appears to have crashed into a tree and caught fire. We're still investigating, but the damage is extensive." Rachel's hand trembled as she set the phone down. Terry leaned forward, his brows furrowed. "What's wrong?" "It's done," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's gone." And Terry's eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. But then, slowly, a grin spread across his lips. "We did it," he said, almost in awe. The days that followed were a whirlwind of staged grief and whispered plans. Rachel played the role of the grieving widow flawlessly, her crocodile tears convincing even the sharpest of reporters. The media swarmed the mansion, painting Michael's death as a tragic accident. But as Rachel and Terry celebrated in private, the cracks in their scheme began to show. Rachel noticed strange things: documents missing from Michael's office, an envelope left on her vanity containing a single, chilling note, "I see you." At first, she dismissed it as paranoia, but when she woke one night to the sound of footsteps in the hall, her confidence began to waver. Terry, too, started to feel the weight of their actions. He swore he saw Michael's reflection in a shop window, only to turn and find no one there. The tension between them grew, each blaming the other for their fraying nerves. Meanwhile, Michael, very much alive, watched from the shadows. Using his vast resources, he systematically dismantled Rachel and Terry's lives. Bank accounts were frozen, deals fell apart, and a steady trickle of incriminating evidence against them was anonymously leaked to the authorities. 1 week after his death, Michael decided it was time for the final act. Under the cover of night, he slipped into the mansion he once called home. Rachel and Terry were in the living room, arguing in hushed but heated tones. "We need to leave," Terry said, pacing like a caged animal. "Something's not right. That note, what if someone knows?" Rachel's eyes flashed with anger. "We're not going anywhere. Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for this? We stay, or we stick to the plan." "But what if..." Terry froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color as his eyes fixed on the figure standing in the doorway. Michael stepped into the room, his presence commanding and cold. What, Terry?" he said, his voice low and menacing. Rachel turned slowly, her breath catching in her throat. "Michael?" she stammered, her face a mask of shock and fear. Surprised to see me," Michael said, his lips curling into a bitter smile. "You shouldn't be. You should have known I wouldn't go down that easily." Rachel stumbled back, her composure crumbling. This isn't possible. We saw the wreck. The police—" Michael cut her off with a sharp laugh. "The police? Oh, they played their part perfectly. Did you really think I wouldn't figure out your pathetic little plan?" Terry stepped forward, his hands raised in a weak attempt at appeasement. "Michael, listen, it wasn't what you think." "Save it," Michael snapped, his voice like a whip. "I trusted you, Terry. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? By trying to kill me?" Terry faltered, his shoulders slumping under the weight of his guilt. Rachel, however, wasn't done. Her fear gave way to anger, her eyes narrowing as she stepped closer to Michael. "You think you can scare us?" she spat. "You have no proof. You're just as trapped as we are." Michael's smile turned icy. "Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that." He pulled a small device from his pocket and pressed play. Rachel and Terry's voices filled the room. Their damning conversation about sabotaging his brakes, recorded with chilling clarity. Rachel's face went pale, her legs giving out beneath her. Terry sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "You're done," Michael said, his voice cold and final. "The police are on their way. Enjoy your freedom while it lasts, what little of it you have left." As sirens wailed in the distance, Michael turned and walked away, leaving behind the ruins of the two people who had betrayed him. The atmosphere in the lawyer's office was thick with anticipation, the air almost suffocating as Rachel adjusted her perfectly tailored dress and cast a sidelong glance at Terry. He was fidgeting, tapping his foot against the polished marble floor, the nervous energy radiating off him like heat. She resisted the urge to snap at him. Today was supposed to be their victory. "Relax," she muttered, her tone sharper than intended. "Everything is under control." Terry shot her a doubtful look, but said nothing. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair and sank deeper into his chair. The ticking of the ornate wall clock was a constant reminder that every second brought them closer to sealing their fortune. Moments later, the door to the office swung open, and Mr. Caldwell, Michael's longtime attorney, strode in with an air of gravitas. His stern expression was unreadable as he took a seat behind the massive oak desk, a thick envelope clutched in his hand. "Mr. Caldwell," Rachel began, her voice carefully modulated with a hint of faint sorrow, "we appreciate you handling this so quickly after Michael's tragic passing." Caldwell's sharp eyes flicked up to meet hers, and for a fleeting second she felt a chill run down her spine. But she pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the envelope he was opening with deliberate slowness. As Michael's legal counsel, Caldwell began, his voice measured, "It is my duty to ensure that his final wishes are carried out without complication." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle before pulling out a series of papers. "However," he continued, "there is a new stipulation in the will that was added shortly before Michael's death." Rachel's smile faltered, her fingers tightening around the armrest of her chair. What kind of stipulation?" Caldwell placed a page on the desk, sliding it toward them with calculated precision. "This clause specifies that in the event of any suspicion surrounding Michael's death, the transfer of his estate will be placed on hold until a thorough investigation is completed." "What?" Rachel's voice rose involuntarily. That's absurd. Michael's death was an accident. Was it? Caldwell interjected, his gaze cutting through her like a knife. The authorities are not so sure, and as of this morning, the estate has been frozen pending further inquiry. Terry shot up from his chair, his face a mask of panic. You can't do that. This is our... He stopped himself, realizing too late that his words betrayed too much. Rachel quickly took control, her tone icy and measured. Surely there's some mistake. Michael wouldn't... He couldn't have anticipated something like this. Couldn't I? The voice, unmistakable and laced with cold fury, sliced through the room like a blade. Rachel's breath caught in her throat, and Terry stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his chair. They both turned toward the doorway, their faces draining of color. There he stood. Michael, alive. His commanding presence filled the room, the tailored suit he wore only amplifying the aura of power and rage emanating from him. His piercing gaze locked onto Rachel first, then Terry, as he stepped forward, each movement deliberate and loaded with menace. Surprised? Michael asked, his voice low and venomous. You shouldn't be. After all, you were the ones who orchestrated my death. Rachel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Terry, trembling, stammered, Michael, we thought... You thought you could get away with it, Michael snapped, his tone like the crack of a whip. That I wouldn't see through your lies, that I wouldn't uncover your pathetic little scheme. But you underestimated me. He turned to Caldwell, who was now leaning back in his chair, watching the scene unfold with quiet interest. Thank you for delaying this meeting, Mr. Caldwell. It's given me the time I needed to ensure justice is served. What are you talking about? Rachel finally managed to find her voice, though it was shaky and far less confident than she intended. Michael, this is insane. We had nothing to do with your accident. Accident? Michael's laugh was sharp and bitter. Is that what you're calling it now? The brake lines on my car weren't cut by chance, Rachel. And who else would have done it but the two people I trusted most? Terry's knees buckled and he dropped back into his chair, his face ashen. Michael, please, you don't understand. Rachel, she made me do it. Rachel whipped around, her eyes blazing. Don't you dare pin this on me, Terry. You were just as involved as I was. Enough! Michael's voice boomed, silencing them both. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small recorder, placing it on Caldwell's desk. Do you know what this is? It's the recording of your little parking lot conversation. Every word, every detail of your disgusting plan captured perfectly. Rachel's face crumpled, her veneer of control shattering. Michael, please. If you found this story to be heartwarming, please share it with a friend who needs to hear this. And if you're going through a difficult time, remember that you're not alone. Share your thoughts with us. Save it, Michael snarled. I don't want to hear another lie from either of you. At that moment, the door to the office opened again, and two uniformed police officers entered, their presence commanding. One of them nodded to Michael. We're ready. Rachel shot up from her chair, her hands raised in a desperate plea. Michael, no. Don't do this. We can fix this. We can... Fix this? Michael repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. There's nothing to fix, Rachel. You betrayed me. You tried to kill me. And now, you'll pay the price. Terry began to sob openly, his shoulders shaking as the officers moved toward him. Rachel, still defiant, turned to Michael one last time. You think you've won, don't you? You think this makes you better than us? Michael stepped closer, his expression unreadable. The difference between us, Rachel, is that I built my empire on hard work and trust. You tried to steal it through deceit and murder. I didn't win. You lost. The officers handcuffed Rachel and Terry, Leading them out of the office as their protests faded into silence, Michael watched them go, his expression a mix of relief and sorrow. Caldwell cleared his throat, drawing Michael's attention. "You handled that well," the lawyer said quietly. "But what now?" Michael exhaled slowly, the weight of the ordeal pressing down on him. "Now," he said, his voice steady, "I rebuild. And this time, I'll surround myself with people who actually deserve to be in my life." As he left the office, the sun broke through the clouds, casting its light on a man who had not only survived betrayal, but emerged stronger, ready to reclaim the life he had almost lost. The mansion stood eerily silent that evening, its grandeur now feeling like an empty shell. Michael sat alone in his study, the weight of the day pressing heavily on his shoulders. Rachel and Terry were gone, hauled away in handcuffs, their faces etched with shock and fury. Yet the victory brought him no joy. The betrayal of the two people he had cherished most cut deeper than he could have anticipated. The faint creak of the door broke his train of thought. Michael looked up to see William, hesitant but determined, lingering in the doorway. The boy's small frame was dwarfed by the oversized sweater he wore, and his face was a mix of concern and guilt. "Mr. Michael?" William's voice was soft but steady. "Are you okay?" Michael forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Come in, William. No need to hover like a ghost." And stepped in cautiously, his eyes darting around the room as if he didn't quite belong. I wanted to say I'm sorry. About everything. About your wife and your brother." Michael sighed, leaning back in his chair. "None of that is your fault, William. If anything, I owe you more than I can put into words. Without you..." He paused, the enormity of what could have happened hitting him anew. "Let's just say, I wouldn't be here." The boy shuffled his feet awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. Michael studied him for a moment, taking in the determination in William's eyes, the bravery that had driven him to act when so many others would have walked away. "You know," Michael began, his tone softening, "you've shown more loyalty and courage than anyone else in my life. You risked everything to help me, even when you didn't have to." William shrugged, his voice barely above a whisper. "You needed help. Nobody ever helped me. So I know what it's like to feel alone." The simple honesty in those words struck Michael like a blow. He leaned forward, clasping his hands together as a thought began to form in his mind, an idea that felt both bold and right. "What if you didn't have to feel alone anymore?" Michael asked, his voice steady. William frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Michael stood, his imposing figure softened by the warmth that's in his expression. "I mean, what if this mansion wasn't just a house for one man? What if it was a home for both of us?" The boy's eyes widened. "Are you saying you want me to stay here?" "I'm saying I want you to be part of my family," Michael said firmly. "I want to adopt you, William, if you'll have me." For a moment, William was speechless, his mind racing. He had spent his life surviving on scraps and sleeping in alleys, never daring to hope for something more. The idea of being part of a family, of having someone care about him, felt almost too good to be true. "You really mean it?" William finally asked, his voice cracking. Michael nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I do. You've earned it, William. You deserve a chance at a better life, a life where you don't have to fight for every scrap or sleep with one eye open. And I'll make sure you have that." Tears welled up in the boy's eyes, but he quickly wiped them away, nodding fiercely. "Okay, I mean, yes, I'd like that." Michael placed a hand on William's shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. "Good, because I think we both need this. A fresh start, a chance to rebuild." The days that followed were unlike anything William had ever experienced. Michael moved quickly, ensuring the adoption paperwork was filed and the boy's transition into his new life was seamless. For the first time, William had his own room, a bed with crisp sheets, and a closet filled with clothes that actually fit him. He even started attending a private school, something he had only ever seen in movies. But more than the material comforts, it was the bond between them that transformed their lives. Michael, once hardened by betrayal and loss, found a renewed sense of purpose in mentoring William. He taught the boy about responsibility and perseverance, while William, in turn, reminded Michael of the importance of trust and loyalty. They often spent evenings together in the study, Michael sharing stories of his rise to success, while William eagerly soaked up every lesson. On weekends, they explored the city, Michael introducing William to museums, parks, and restaurants he had never dreamed of visiting. Yet not every moment was easy. William struggled to adjust to his new life, occasionally feeling out of place in the world of wealth and privilege. And Michael, despite his best efforts, grappled with the lingering pain of Rachel and Terry's betrayal. But together they faced these challenges head-on, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, as they sat by the grand fireplace, William turned to Michael with a serious expression. "Do you think they'll ever get out of prison, Rachel and Terry?" Michael's jaw tightened at the mention of their names, but he forced himself to respond calmly. "Perhaps. But even if they do, they'll never be part of my life again. Some betrayals cut too deep to forgive." William nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. "I don't get it. How could they do that to you? You were so good to them." Michael sighed, staring into the flickering flames. "Greed, William. It can blind people, make them forget what truly matters. But I've learned something from all this." "What's that?" William asked. "Family isn't just about blood," Michael said, his voice filled with conviction. "It's about loyalty, trust, and the people who stand by you when it matters most. And that's what we are now. You and me. A real family." William smiled, the warmth of Michael's words filling a void he had carried for as long as he could remember. "Yeah, a real family." As the fire crackled softly, Michael felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they no longer defined him. He had found something far more valuable, a second chance to build a life worth living with someone who truly cared. Together, they began a new chapter, not as a man and a boy from two different worlds, but as father and son, bound by trust, loyalty, and the promise of a brighter future. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the sprawling estate. The once empty mansion now thrummed with new life, laughter echoing through its halls. Michael stood on the balcony, overlooking the manicured gardens, a sense of calm washing over him. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Behind him, the door creaked open, and William stepped out, holding a leather-bound notebook. Now 15, the boy carried himself with a confidence that had been unthinkable when they first met. His face, once pale and gaunt, now bore the healthy glow of youth, his eyes sharp with determination. "I have been going over the quarterly reports," William said, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. "The numbers for the new housing initiative are strong, but I think we could do more to support the community. Maybe allocate part of the profits to local education programs?" Michael turned, a slow smile spreading across his face. He had spent countless hours teaching William about the complexities of business, balancing ambition with integrity, profitability with compassion. And now, standing before him was a young man who embodied everything he had hoped for. "Education programs?" Michael echoed. his tone light with approval. Not bad at all. William grinned, taking a seat on the edge of the balcony rail. You always say the key to success is investing in people, right? So I figured we should start there. Michael chuckled, shaking his head. You've been paying attention after all. Their bond had grown stronger with each passing year. Michael had legally adopted William, naming him the rightful heir to his fortune and legacy. But their relationship was far more than just a legal arrangement. They were father and son in every way that mattered, bound by trust, shared dreams, and a mutual respect that had transformed both their lives. The transformation wasn't just in William. Michael, too. All had changed. Gone was the man who measured his worth by the size of his bank account and the grandeur of his possessions. The betrayal by Rachel and Terry had been a painful lesson, but it had also opened his eyes to what truly mattered. Michael had rebuilt his empire, this time with a renewed focus on ethical practices and giving back. Under his guidance, William was becoming a leader who balanced ambition with empathy, a far cry from the greed-driven world Michael had once navigated. One afternoon during a board meeting, William had stunned the room by standing up and challenging a proposal that would have maximized profits at the expense of the environment. We're not just here to make money, he'd said, his voice unwavering. We're here to make a difference. Michael had never been prouder. As the years rolled on, their lives became a testament to resilience and renewal. Together, they launched initiatives that transformed entire communities. Housing projects for the homeless, scholarship programs for underprivileged youth, and sustainability practices that set a new standard in the industry. But it wasn't just their public successes that defined them. It was the quiet moments, the late-night talks by the fire, the shared jokes during dinner, and the deep trust that allowed them to lean on each other through challenges. One evening, as they sat in the study, reviewing plans for a new philanthropic venture, William looked up, his expression uncharacteristically serious. You know, he began, his voice softer than usual. If it weren't for you, I'd still be out there on the streets, barely surviving. I owe you everything. Michael set down his pen, leaning back in his chair, and, No, William, you owe me nothing. You earned your place here. You made a choice to do the right thing when you could have walked away, and that choice changed both our lives. William nodded, his gaze thoughtful. Still, I hope I make you proud. Michael's smile was warm, his voice filled with quiet conviction. You already have, more than you'll ever know. On a crisp autumn morning, Michael and William stood together at the edge of the estate, watching as a group of children played in the newly built community park. The laughter of the children carried on the breeze, a sound that filled Michael with an overwhelming sense of peace. Do you know, Michael said, his eyes fixed on the scene before them, if someone had told me years ago that this is where I'd end up, I wouldn't have believed him. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. William glanced at him, his smile mirroring the contentment in Michael's voice. Neither would I. The sun broke through the clouds, casting its golden light over the park, the mansion, and the two figures standing side by side. It was a new dawn, not just for them, but for the countless lives they had touched and would continue to impact. As they turned to head back to the house, Michael placed a hand on William's shoulder, his voice steady and filled with hope. The future is ours to build, William, and I have no doubt we'll make it a great one. William nodded, his steps confident as he walked beside the man who had become not just his father, but his guiding star. Together, they were more than a family. They were proof that even in the face of betrayal and loss, trust and loyalty could rebuild everything. And as they disappeared into the warmth of the home they had built together, one truth lingered. The greatest wealth was never in what they owned, but in who they had become.